Good morning, everyone. So I'm Will Crow, again from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and thank you, Anne, and thank you to the staff of Crystal Bridges for the invitation to be part of this exciting conversation today. The topic of distance learning and what it means has really been central to my work at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where I oversee school and teacher programs. Of course, it's not possible to share every experiment that we've tried in this arena over the past few years in the 15 minutes that I have with you. But I wanted to preface my short case study this morning by saying that, of course, I'm very happy to share any details about the programs that I mentioned, since I'll be speaking in broad strokes. So my experience with art museum education essentially was one of distance learning, although in a very analog format. At first, in 1999, I began my work as an art museum educator, equipped with a very heavy 35 millimeter slide projector, going out to schools across the 5 boroughs of New York City in a program called The Met Goes to School. I had boxes of colored pencils with me, a white bed sheet that I would duct tape onto blackboards as a makeshift screen in all of these schools, and I visited the classrooms really with the goal of encouraging these school groups to come to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. You can advance to some of the next few slides. You can go ahead and do 3 more images. As you might suspect, classroom environments were not ideal scenarios for some of this work. The 35 millimeter slides did not show the works of art in all of their detail. Sometimes classrooms did not have functioning electrical outlets. And so sometimes we had to resort to using color prints or posters or other materials. And when I was teaching with this outreach program, I really saw all of these things as obstacles. And I thought my role was to really bring these stunning visuals of works of art out to the schools and to deliver their message to students. While, of course, the works of art were central to this program, I quickly learned that I was not in a museum environment. My tactics really needed to change. And I learned that the heart of the program was really about the interaction with the art. We used activities like sketching or even tableaux vivants of students posing like Washington crossing the Delaware so that they could learn how to learn about works of art themselves and to become empowered with the skills and confidence of interpreting works of art. So a lesson that I learned then, and one that I learned again and again as we explored the use of technology for distance learning, was really one of uniqueness. What kinds of activities happen best in the museum? What happens best in a classroom? What happens best in other kinds of environments, including digital ones? Now, during these 4 years of teaching off-site in schools, there were other compelling conversations that were percolating in the fields of education, technology, and museums. And in fact, one could see this just by walking into a classroom. You can advance to these 2 images. You could see immediately that the desks no longer faced the blackboard in rows, but instead rooms were transforming into circles or pods or maybe even no desks at all. Students and teachers that were collaborating together in new ways. Next slides. Another change, of course, that was underway was in the world of technology. For the most part, computers were replacing those 35 millimeter slide projectors. But really the larger idea was that information was becoming less like a one-way radio broadcast signal and was more about sharing, creating, remixing, and collaborating. Now, museums may not be known as being places of rapid change, but of course there was change happening in the field of museum education as well. While 100 years ago, you might see a class pointing in unison at a painting, reciting information that they'd memorized. In fact, today, of course, we know that museum visitors learn about works of art in very different ways. They've shifted from being viewers to doers. They write, they draw, they perform, and they use their own handheld technologies to capture, create, and share. Go to the next one. So in 2004, when the Metropolitan was building a new education center, and we were essentially a construction site, the access of school groups coming into the museum was limited. And we wondered, what should we do? Should we expand our off-site program? Should we reimagine the Met Goes to School? Well, it was very expensive to do that program. We also wondered if those one-off programs that were spread so thinly across many schools in New York City, were they really anchoring the kinds of learning that we wanted to achieve? And so we wondered perhaps technology could hold a key to having a different type of impact. So we explored different models of distance learning. We gathered advice from colleagues, just like we're doing today. We wondered if we should start a then traditional style of video conferencing program working directly with students using a Polycom-based system, but how could we possibly meet the demand of all of these schools on a national or even international scale? We didn't have the staff resources to implement this new type of program, and we also worried about schools not having that specialized equipment and the barriers to participation. But really beyond those questions of capacity and access were ones of pedagogy. Given that technologies and the field of learning as a whole was shifting towards a more learner-centered participatory approach, how could we engage visitors in ways beyond trying to deliver a museum experience to them? So the next slide is that we wondered if this was really even a question about distance, or was there something else that was really going on as part of this conversation? And the question that we settled on, if you advance, is we wondered how could staff and visitors collaborate online using these new technologies to deepen and expand encounters with the museum? So we decided to work with teachers rather than students directly, and part of this decision was a resource one. Because we didn't have staff to work on a broad scale directly with students, we thought that working with teachers would free us from some of those school-based barriers. And we also saw teachers as a strategic audience because, as you know, a single teacher might work with 25 students on the elementary level or even over 100 students in the course of a year on a secondary level, multiplied over a lifetime of a teaching career. So for the past 8 years at the Metropolitan, we've been experimenting with different types of online collaborative programs with teachers. And so I'll share with you some snapshots of some of those experiments and some of the rewards and challenges that we've found with each. So in 2006, we offered our first blended course for elementary teachers. It was a 4-week course that involved discussion boards, blogs, group wiki projects, live webinars, and culminated with an in-person workshop at the museum. The course was called Face to Face and invited these teachers to explore portraits in the museum. They also collaboratively built lessons in groups that they implemented with their students. And 6 months after the workshop occurred, they reunited in a webinar-based reunion to tell us how they had implemented these lessons with their students. Go to the next one. Then there were, actually, I might have skipped over one slide, I'm not sure. No? Oh, that's fine. Just some pros and cons. On the positive side, there were many aspects of that pilot experiment that were terrifically exciting to us. Foremost was a model of co-expertise with teachers with online collaboration. Teachers were developing lessons themselves, using museum resources, and we were really there as a type of consultant for them. They could test these out, share them with their peers, and the course could be replicated, which we did the following year. But some challenges with this initial experiment was very time-intensive for staff. Essentially, we were teaching a graduate class. We were investing a lot into relatively few participants. We had 30 participants in these first few courses. And we wondered if there were even other things that we could be seizing upon in this online model. So this led us to our next experiment, which was called Art, Science, and Inquiry, which we offered several times between 2009 and 2011. We ventured across Central Park to the American Museum of Natural History to learn more about how they were using online professional development models with their seminars on science program. And through those conversations, we developed this blended workshop for teachers. We saw that artists and scientists were using very similar skills of investigation and observation and problem solving. And so this course, Art, Science, and Inquiry, unfolded over a 4-week period. It included on-site visits to both museums. And again, teachers created lessons in a more skill-based way to see connections between the two disciplines. And so some pros and cons of this approach. The interdisciplinary nature of collaborating with another museum really broke new ground for us. Teachers were able to work together in ways that they might not typically do, and we felt like this was an authentic way of integrating two disciplines that didn't privilege one over the other. It was also a rich professional development opportunity for the museum staff, of course. We learned from our colleagues across the park, and we pooled our resources and efforts. But again, some drawbacks. Collaboration can be hard. It takes a lot of time to align goals, to define roles. It was time intensive. And we did this out of existing program funds. Although we did charge fees to the teachers, we wondered if this was really a long-term sustainable model. So that then led us, starting in 2011, into webinars for educators. Seeing that many of our participants in these programs cited the live interaction as a highlight of their experience, we wanted to really explore synchronous interaction further. So we've offered single session 75-minute webinars for educators. They typically focus on a teaching strategy, a collection area, or a museum resource. They are highly interactive. We use whiteboard tools, we use text and audio-based chat, and even group work in these different models. We've also had the opportunity to, again, collaborate with other institutions. We've worked with the Getty Villa on a Greek and Roman art webinar, with the Smithsonian on American art and the Civil War recently. And we've also thought about these new platforms as ways to collaborate with organizations with the goal of extending reach. Last October, we worked with the U.S. Department of State to reach teachers of English language internationally. And in just 2 webinars, we were able to reach 1,100 educators from 35 different countries. So we're looking for opportunities for these strategic collaborations. Again, some pros and cons, though. Live webinars offer real-time guided learning that teachers value. They're less resource intensive and less time intensive to develop overall. But on the negative side of things, there's less time to interact with the teachers. There isn't really the opportunity for them to synthesize or apply like we had them do in longer blended programs. And of course, on a global scale with real-time programs, it raises all kinds of logistical issues about time zones, for example. So now, what we've been doing is thinking about blurring the lines between on-site programming and online technologies. We continue to use online technologies for what might be called distance learning programs, but recently we've been experimenting. So for example, this is a recent program that we hosted with the Met's Artist in Residence, Paul Miller, AKA DJ Spooky. And we had teachers collaborate in groups using the app Evernote in order to share, record, and really create ideas for lessons that then could be shared to an online audience of teachers that wasn't able to participate in person. And the next example actually is happening today as I speak. Our week-long Summer Teacher Institute that we host in collaboration with MoMA and the Whitney and the Guggenheim for the first time has hired a social media specialist to post to Facebook, to tweet about what's happening in the program, and to ask questions, primarily to alumni of this program, in order to engage an online audience while the on-site program is happening. So where we are now, just from a bird's eye view, we still focus primarily on our on-site programs. We work with about 4,000 teachers through our on-site programs, but we work with about 1,500 through facilitated online programs. We're, again, seeking strategic collaborations in order to extend reach, like through the U.S. State Department, and are in the very early stages of exploring a massive online open course in the coming year. But we're also thinking about how can we blur the lines between on-site and online programmings by using free apps that K-12 educators are already using and social media. And then to conclude, some big questions. We are still struggling with how we can expand reach of these programs while maintaining the interaction that we seek. We also are wondering how we can best allocate museum resources, given that 6 million visitors come to the Met every year, but 50 million visit online. What does that mean for us as museum educators? We also wonder how we can create more effective self-guided or non-facilitated experiences online. And how can we continue to harness the potential of online collaboration in our on-site programs and vice versa? So to conclude, we're still seeking the optimal ways to use technology to not only reach visitors over distance, but to collaborate with them in a variety of ways and learn alongside them so that we can maximize the public value of the institution. We haven't yet found a perfect formula to do this, and maybe there isn't one, and so I look forward to our conversations today and tomorrow morning to consider new possibilities. Thanks. That's it.